And welcome back to 12 Steps to Poker Heaven. I'm Carmel Thomas, and with me is the infamous Grub Smith.
Infamous, fantastic.
Yes. Now, in the first part, we took you through how to read players, and we showed you some great plays by pros and by amateurs alike.
That is true. We saw some great moves, people reading their opponents perfectly, sensing weakness, sniffing it out like a tiger in the jungle, and not being afraid to pounce. That's the best feeling in poker.
Absolutely. Right, let's have a look at step 8. Now, as we all know, every tournament eventually boils down to a contest where the final two battle it out for that illustrious title or some generous prize money.
That is correct. Heads-up play is the business end of poker. If you intend on winning tournaments, not just finishing in the lower places, you've got to learn how to play heads-up. It's a completely different beast to normal poker. It really is about psychology. It's about playing the player as much as playing your cards.
So why is it so very different?
Well, you've only got two players at the table. You can't wait for good hands. You've really got to play any two cards you're given. If you get paint, that is to say a king, a queen, or a jack, or any sort of ace, you've got to be raising with hands like that, even if it's ace deuce or king three. Any sort of pair you re-raise with. Good high cards, ace queen, you re-raise with. It's about aggression. You can't hang around. Now, in heads-up play, the dealer button has the small blind. So you've pretty much always got pot odds to call. That you shouldn't be folding anything at all. And if we look at Joe Hasham winning the World Series a couple of years ago, he actually won it with 7-3 offsuit, one of the worst hands you can start with. But he knew that in a heads-up contest, he can hit a flop and he can win, and he did. Millions of dollars.
Now let's look at an example from the British Poker Open 2006.
Two top-ranked players in action here, Noah Bokin from the Netherlands and Gus Hansen, the Great Dane. Plays with any two cards at the best of times, and heads up, you can be sure he will not be folding even a 10-3 of spades. Sure enough.
Call.
Noah has got 10 jack. Could raise with this hand pre-flop, but he decides, no, we'll see a flop. And if a 10 came on the flop, we would see some action. And there is a 10, so Noah now very much the favourite. Gus dead to the threes. Those three hearts might slow them down a little, but I'd like to see a bet here from Noah. He doesn't want to let Gus draw to a possible flush. No, he checks and Gus says fine. So Noah has left the door open, and that is two pairs for Gus Hansen. 10s and 3s. And Noah, well, he didn't bet when he was in front.
All in?
He's gone all in. Gus's eyes popping out on stalks.
Wow.
Well, he must know that his two pairs are good, unless he thinks
There's
Noah...
no way he's going to fold, is there?
No, he can't fold, but he's taking his time very sensibly, wondering whether he's got whether Noah has got a set or he's hit that flush. But if you're playing heads up and you're playing 10-3 and you hit two pairs by the turn, really the money does have to go in the middle.
I call.
Call.
We have a showdown.
Turns over his cards, and that is a sickener for Noah Bokin. He's really got, well, just 6 outs. The 3 jacks or one of the 3 remaining 4s would give him a better kicker. They both have 10s and 4s, but the jack in Noah's hand would play. Here comes the river. It is a 4, and that's horrible. I mean, Gus has been counterfeited there in the most ghastly fashion. Bokin is happy, but I've got to say, he didn't actually play that hand very well. There is an element of luck in poker, I'm afraid. He rode his pretty hard there. Not betting when you're in front and going all in when you're behind is about as sensible as jumping in front of a bus.
Now, Grub, you mentioned earlier that heads up is a different game altogether. So how should you change your style to adapt to this?
Well, you really do have to mix your game up. Because you're only playing one person, he's going to be watching you like a hawk the whole time. So you mustn't fall into predictable patterns, or he's going to find you very easy to toy with, and he can just wait for decent hands and knock you out. So you've got to mix it up. Sometimes you've got to bet big pre-flop, even if you've got nothing. Sometimes you've got to check raise. Sometimes just check call. You really have to be changing almost every hand. It's like being in a kaleidoscope. Conversely, you've got to be watching him, again, hoping that he's a weak player and that he will do things predictably. Every time you see his cards turned over, when you get to a river, or sometimes he might show a bluff, mentally log it away. How did he play that hand? Let me remember that. The most important thing, though, is aggression. You're not going to win a poker tournament by checking and folding. Sooner or later, you have to make a stand. And remember, it's a bit like playing cards on the edge of a precipice. You only have to win once, and that guy's going to go tumbling down.
Absolutely.
If you can get all the chips in the middle and get lucky.
Well, let's have a look at an aggressive play.
This is from the Poker Heaven Fast and Furious Challenge. It's a type of speed poker where the players get 30 seconds, and we can see Paul Sandals with Queen 9 up against Ian Hope's 9-3. And just a flat call with the Queen 9 pre-flop. That's very passive. Quite a good hand, heads up. And he's let Hope hit his 3. And Hope immediately reaching for chips. He'll know that most players miss most flops.
24.
Especially heads up. You're quite unlikely to actually make a pair. So that 3 in Hope's hand, very powerful. And he backs it up with a bet. Now, Sandals, who didn't raise pre-flop when he had a healthy hand, is now way behind. But
There's no way Sandals can simply call.
No, in this case it's either fold or raise and find out where you are, and he does make the raise, and he just needs to be hefty enough, and he certainly seems to have bumped it up and put Hope to a test. You can see as soon as they start scratching their faces and looking at their cards again, you pretty much know you're home and hosed. Hope won't fancy his 3 now. This is the power of bluffing. It's odd, funnily enough. It would have been easier for him to win the pot had he bet pre-flop, because Hope would probably have had to fold his 9-3 to a healthy raise. As it is, the result is good. He's going to pull down the chips, but that's a bit of a high-wire act there from Sandals. We've got 2 players here, Kang and Corneau. Corneau in the white shirt, and he is going to put some ammo in the middle. So Kang now has to decide how comfortable he feels. 9-2 offsuit. Well, he doesn't fancy it. Can't really blame him. But you've got to bear in mind, of course, that there's a great opportunity for bluffing heads up. You can't just wait until you've got King-Queen. It's not what you've got. It's what the other player thinks you've got. So if you represent strength all the time, there are only certain hands that a passive player will call you with. And even if you get caught bluffing once in a while, you are going to be eating away at his chip lead and eating away at his confidence. He says, let's have a look at my hole cards. Again, he's not in a hurry to look at his cards. I like that, keeping his pace, and he's found good cards. That is the ace and the jack, the Ajax, they call that hand. And again, he should probably be raising here. If he was really mixing his game up, he might consider a flat call here. But the great player Antonio Esfandiari says you should always build a pot to win a pot. If you've got good cards, put money in, hope that you get called, so that when you do win, you win big. We're going to see a flop. There is a 2 there for Herr Kang from Germany. And not very much except overcards for young Monsieur Corneau. Oh, but look at that. Kang didn't bet when he had the 2. We've seen this before, and now he's let Corneau in through the back window. And with that ace, he is very, very dominant indeed. Makes a bet and takes it down. Again, if you hit any flop heads up, you should really be betting. Kang let him off the hook there. It was like catching a big ripe fish and then throwing it back in the water. He'd hit the flop. His opponent hadn't. Had he bet there, it would have been extremely hard for Corneau to call, even with his ace-jack. They're both very serious about their game. They're not really having a go at each other verbally. They're not using all the weapons in their arsenal. They're not really even looking at each other. I'd like to see a lot more probing, a lot more trash talk, a lot more studying of the other player while he's looking at his cards. That's the time to look at a player. When he first looks at his cards, he will react.